The transport ship Void Crawler drifted through the emptiness between star systems, its cargo hold filled with the most dangerous prisoners the Galactic Coalition had ever captured. Among the rows of containment cells, each designed for specific alien physiologies, sat a single human in ordinary metal shackles. Marcus Chin had been silent for 3 months. While other prisoners screamed, bargained, or threatened their captors, he simply sat with his back against the cold wall, eyes closed, breathing steady. The other inmates had learned to avoid looking at him directly. There was something unsettling about his perfect stillness, the way he seemed to disappear into himself despite being physically present. The ship's crew consisted mainly of Vorthack guards, massive reptilian beings whose thick scales could deflect most energy weapons. They took pride in their reputation as the galaxy's most feared prison transport specialists. Captain Krez had been moving dangerous criminals for over 20 standard years, and he'd never lost a prisoner or had a successful escape attempt. "The human hasn't spoken since we picked him up from Terra Station," reported Lieutenant Voss, checking the daily prisoner status on her datapad. "Medical scans show he's healthy, but psychological evaluation is inconclusive." Captain Krez flicked his forked tongue, tasting the recycled air. Humans are strange creatures. Some break immediately under pressure, others shut down completely. As long as he remains contained, his mental state is irrelevant. What the captain didn't know was that Marcus wasn't broken or shut down. He was waiting. During his years serving in the Human Defense Corps' Special Operations Division, he'd learned the value of patience. Every guard rotation, every meal delivery, every system check was being cataloged and memorized. The Vorthack were efficient but predictable, following the same routines day after day. The other prisoners provided constant background noise that masked his own activities. In Cell Block 7, a Zephyrian assassin named Kilks would rattle his containment field every few hours, sending electrical feedback through the ship's systems. 2 cells down, a group of hegemony pirates sang their death songs in harmonious wails. The cacophony was perfect cover for Marcus to test the limits of his restraints. His shackles were standard titanium alloy, designed to hold beings with 3 times human strength. What his captors hadn't considered was human flexibility and problem-solving ability. Over weeks, Marcus had been gradually loosening the bolts by applying precise pressure at specific angles during the ship's routine course corrections. The micro-vibrations from the engines helped mask the tiny metallic sounds. On day 87, everything changed. The Void Crawler dropped out of hyperspace with an emergency klaxon blaring through the corridors. Marcus felt the ship shudder as something massive struck the hull. Through the small porthole in his cell, he glimpsed the sleek black forms of unknown vessels moving with predatory grace around the transport. "Unidentified ships, this is Captain Krez of the Coalition vessel Void Crawler," came the announcement over the comm system. "You are interfering with official prisoner transport. Withdraw immediately or face retaliation." The response came in a language Marcus had never heard, all clicking consonants and whistling undertones. But the universal translator soon provided the chilling meaning: surrender your cargo or be destroyed. The ship rocked again as energy beams struck the shields. Red emergency lighting bathed the prisoner compartments, and several aliens began panicking in their cells. Marcus remained motionless, but his mind was racing. Pirates, raiders, or maybe something worse had found them. In the chaos, opportunity might present itself. "All guards to battle stations," Captain Krez ordered. "Maintain prisoner security protocols. If we're boarded, standard containment procedures remain in effect." Through the corridors, Marcus could hear the heavy footsteps of Vorthack guards moving to defensive positions. The ship's defensive systems came online with a distinctive whine, but it was clear they were outmatched. The unknown attackers had appeared from nowhere and surrounded them completely. The battle was brief and decisive. Within 20 minutes, the sounds of weapons fire ceased, replaced by the hiss of airlocks being forced open. New voices echoed through the ship, speaking in that same clicking language. Marcus heard the distinctive sound of Vorthack surrender whistles, a cultural signal he'd learned during his military service. Heavy footsteps approached the prisoner compartments, but these weren't the familiar sounds of Vorthack boots. The newcomers moved differently, with a lighter step despite their apparent size. Marcus cracked one eye open just enough to see through his cell's energy barrier. The creatures entering the prisoner bay were unlike anything in the Coalition's databases. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, with elongated limbs covered in what appeared to be living shadow. Their faces were hidden behind masks that seemed to absorb light, making them difficult to look at directly. Most unsettling were their movements, which flowed like liquid mercury despite their imposing size. "Skin all prisoners," ordered their leader in heavily accented standard. "Identify high-value targets for extraction." One of the shadow beings approached Marcus's cell, pointing a device that bathed him in pale blue light. The scanner beeped several times, then emitted a different tone that made all the creatures suddenly turn toward his position. They began speaking rapidly in their native language, their agitation clear despite the linguistic barrier. The leader approached Marcus's cell directly, studying him with what seemed like recognition. When it spoke again, its voice carried an undertone that made the other prisoners fall silent. "Human," it said slowly, as if testing the word. "We know of your kind. Warriors without equal, destroyers of the hegemon fleet." The creature paused, tilting its masked head. "But you are different. The readings show something more." Marcus maintained his meditative posture, giving no indication he was listening. The shadow being stepped closer to the energy barrier, close enough that Marcus could smell something like ozone and burnt metal. "Your cellular structure shows extensive combat enhancement. Military-grade modifications. Neural pathway optimization." The creature's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "And scars. Many, many scars." For the first time in months, Marcus opened his eyes fully and looked directly at his examiner. The shadow being recoiled slightly, as if struck by the intensity of that gaze. In Marcus's dark eyes was something that made even these predatory creatures uncomfortable. "Yes," the leader murmured, more to itself than to Marcus. "Now I understand the readings." It turned to its companions and spoke rapidly in their clicking language. Marcus caught fragments through the translator. "Special extraction, high priority, inform the collective." The shadow beings began setting up equipment around his cell, preparing for some kind of specialized transport. Marcus noted their gear was far more advanced than anything the Coalition possessed, incorporating technology that seemed to bend space around itself. Whatever these creatures were, they represented a significant threat to galactic stability. As they worked, more of the ship's crew were rounded up and herded toward the airlocks. The Vorthack guards who had seemed so formidable were being treated like children by these new captors. Captain Krez was dragged past Marcus's cell, his reptilian features twisted in defeat and confusion. "The human stays with us," the leader announced to its subordinates. "Prepare the stasis chamber. This one requires special handling." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. Stasis chambers were used for long-term transport across vast distances, sometimes spanning years or decades. Whatever these beings wanted with him, it involved a journey far from known space. The extraction process took several hours. The shadow beings worked with methodical precision, dismantling his cell's containment systems piece by piece. They seemed to understand human technology better than the humans themselves, bypassing security measures that should have been impossible to crack. During this time, Marcus continued his patient observation. He noted how they communicated through both verbal language and subtle changes in their shadowy exterior, creating a complex multi-layered conversation. Their equipment responded to gestural commands that seemed almost ritualistic. Most importantly, he observed that beneath their imposing exterior, they showed signs of fatigue and stress just like any other species. When they finally deactivated his cell's energy barrier, Marcus made no attempt to resist or escape. The shackles he'd been slowly loosening over months remained in place, giving no sign of his preparation. As they approached with restraint devices far more sophisticated than simple metal chains, he allowed himself to be secured without struggle. "Wise choice, human," the leader commented, watching the process. "Resistance would accomplish nothing here." Marcus said nothing, but filed away the observation that these beings expected human resistance. They knew enough about his species to prepare for violence, which meant they'd encountered humans before. That knowledge would prove valuable later. The stasis chamber they brought was a work of art, crafted from materials that seemed to shift between states of matter. As they prepared the neural interface connections, Marcus got his first clear look at their hands beneath the shadowy exterior. The beings had too many joints in their fingers, and their skin seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Subject is prepared for long-term stasis, reported one of the subordinates. Neural suppressors are in place. He will experience no dreams, no awareness during transport. The leader nodded, then did something unexpected. It leaned close to Marcus, close enough that he could see the faint outline of features beneath its light-absorbing mask. "Sleep now, human," it whispered, so quietly that only Marcus could hear. "When you wake, you will understand why the galaxy fears your kind." It paused, studying Marcus's unreadable expression, and why some of us have learned to respect that fear. The stasis field activated with a sound like distant thunder. Marcus felt consciousness slipping away as the neural suppressors took effect. His last sensation was the vibration of engines unlike anything in Coalition space, carrying him toward an unknown destination where his reputation had somehow preceded him. In the moments before complete unconsciousness claimed him, Marcus wondered what exactly these shadow beings had heard about humans, and why they seemed to know more about his personal history than his own captors. The galaxy was apparently a much more dangerous place than anyone in the Coalition realized. The transport ship Void Crawler was left drifting empty in space, its crew and remaining prisoners taken elsewhere. Only the lingering scent of ozone and burnt metal remained as evidence of what had transpired in the prisoner compartments. Marcus Chun, known to his former colleagues as an efficient soldier, was about to discover that his reputation in the wider galaxy was something far more terrifying than he'd ever imagined. Marcus Chun woke to the sound of alien voices discussing his fate in hushed tones. The stasis chamber had released him gradually, bringing his systems online one by one to prevent the shock that killed lesser species. As consciousness returned, he kept his breathing steady and his eyes closed, listening to everything around him. The language was the same clicking and whistling he'd heard during his capture, but now the universal translator in his inner ear was working better. Phrases became clear: anomalous readings, genetic markers, confirmed identity, notify the council immediately. He was lying on a medical examination table in what appeared to be a sophisticated laboratory. The air smelled of antiseptic and something organic he couldn't identify. Through his closed eyelids, he sensed movement around him, the soft padding of feet, and the whisper of advanced medical equipment. "Subject shows remarkable cellular regeneration," said a new voice, different from his captors. This one spoke with the precise tones of a scientist. "The modifications to his system are extensive, but they appear to be largely natural adaptations rather than artificial enhancement." "Natural?" replied the familiar voice of his captor's leader. "You mean evolutionary?" "More than that. These genetic markers suggest exposure to extreme selection pressures over extended periods. This individual has survived scenarios that would kill 99% of his species. The neural pathways show patterns consistent with sustained combat trauma, but also adaptation. His brain has literally rewired itself for enhanced survival." Marcus remained perfectly still while they discussed him like a laboratory specimen. Through years of covert operations, he'd learned that people revealed more when they thought you couldn't hear them. Every piece of information about his captors could prove valuable later. "Run the historical scans again," ordered the leader. "Cross-reference with the collective's database on Terran military operations." There was a pause as equipment hummed around him. Then came a sound he recognized, the sharp intake of breath that indicated shock, though from an alien respiratory system. "By the void," whispered the scientist. "Sir, you need to see this." The genetic signature matches records from 17 different military campaigns across 6 sectors. This individual was present at Kepler Station, Proxima Centauri, the Siege of New Geneva. He was there for all of them. Impossible. Those campaigns spanned over 15 years across thousands of light years. "Sir, the records don't lie. This human was involved in every major coalition victory against the Hegemon Empire. The genetic traces left at those battlefields all point to the same individual. According to the database, enemy forces began referring to him by a specific designation." Another pause, longer this time. "What designation?" "The Reaper, sir. They called him the Reaper." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Marcus heard movement as the beings stepped away from his table, their voices dropping to urgent whispers. He caught fragments. Inform the War Council, Priority Alpha, containment protocols, extreme caution. Finally, understanding why his captors seemed to know him, Marcus opened his eyes. The laboratory was larger than he'd expected, with ceiling that stretched up into shadows. Banks of advanced equipment lined the walls, their purposes unclear but their sophistication obvious. The beings studying him were the same shadow creatures from the transport, but here in better lighting, he could see more details. Their masks weren't just light-absorbing. They seemed to be symbiotic organisms that fed on photons. He's conscious, announced the scientist, checking readings on a floating display. Neural activity has returned to normal parameters. The leader approached cautiously, stopping just beyond arm's reach. Human called Reaper, you have been brought before the Shadow Collective for evaluation. Your reputation precedes you across many worlds. Marcus sat up slowly, testing his mobility. The restraints were gone, but he could feel the subtle hum of containment fields around the examination area. My name is Marcus Chun, serial number 7749 Delta. I was a sergeant in the Human Defense Corps until my capture 3 months ago. Modesty does not suit one with your history, the leader replied. We have records of your activities spanning decades. 17 major military campaigns, 43 covert operations, and an estimated enemy casualty count that reaches into the thousands. I was a soldier following orders. You were death incarnate, the scientist interjected, consulting its floating displays. The psychological profiles we've compiled from enemy survivors all describe the same phenomenon. A human who appeared suddenly, eliminated targets with impossible efficiency, and vanished before reinforcements could respond. They spoke of you as a force of nature rather than a person. Marcus remained silent, processing this information. During his military service, he'd been aware that enemy forces had developed specific protocols for dealing with human soldiers, but he hadn't realized they'd been tracking individual operatives across multiple campaigns. The collective has been observing human expansion for some time. The leader continued, beginning to pace around the examination area. Your species demonstrates combat capabilities that concern many of the galaxy's older civilizations. But you, specifically, represent something more troubling, which is proof that humans can evolve into something beyond merely dangerous. The leader stopped directly in front of him. Your genetic scans show markers we've only seen in apex predator species that have achieved interstellar dominance. The kind of evolutionary pressure that produces ultimate predators. The scientist manipulated its displays, showing Marcus complex genetic charts he couldn't fully interpret. Your DNA contains activated sequences that remain dormant in 98% of the human population. Combat stress, repeated exposure to mortal danger, and survival of scenarios that should have been fatal have triggered evolutionary adaptations normally requiring thousands of years. You're saying I'm not fully human anymore? You're becoming something new, the leader replied. The question that concerns the collective is whether this represents the future direction of your entire species. Marcus absorbed this information while studying his surroundings more carefully. The laboratory wasn't just for medical examination, it was designed for interrogation and possibly experimentation. Whatever these shadow collective beings wanted, it involved more than just satisfying scientific curiosity. Why am I here? He asked directly. Because the galaxy is changing, and the collective must decide how to respond to humanity's expanding influence. The leader gestured to wall displays showing star maps, with human colonial expansion highlighted in red. Your species has claimed over 300 worlds in the past century, establishing military bases and trade routes that threaten existing power structures. Humans are explorers and colonists, not conquerors. Are they? The scientist brought up new displays showing battle footage from various human military operations. These recordings suggest otherwise. Your defense corps employs tactics that other species consider excessive, achieving victory through overwhelming application of force. Marcus recognized some of the footage from his own operations. The recordings showed human forces engaging alien opponents with a level of aggression and adaptability that clearly disturbed the observers. What he'd considered standard military procedure, these beings interpreted as evidence of an inherently violent nature. The collective represents 27 species across 4 galaxies, the leader explained. We maintain stability through careful balance of power and controlled expansion. Humanity's rapid growth pattern threatens that stability. So you want me to what exactly? Convince my government to slow down colonization. We want to understand whether humans can be reasoned with, or whether your species will need to be contained through other means. The leader's tone carried implications that Marcus didn't like. Your individual case study will help determine our response. The conversation was interrupted by an alarm that sent both his captors into immediate action. Red lights began flashing throughout the laboratory as automated announcements echoed in the clicking language. The universal translator provided fragments: security breach, unauthorized entry, all personnel to stations. How is that possible? Demanded the leader, checking readouts on a control panel. This facility is in deep space, light years from any shipping lanes. Sir, we're detecting multiple ship signatures approaching at impossible speeds, reported the scientist, its calm demeanor finally cracking. Configuration matches Coalition fast attack vessels, but they shouldn't be able to track our location. Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with concern. A rescue operation meant his people had somehow found him, but it also meant they were walking into unknown territory against technologically superior opponents. The Shadow Collective clearly possessed capabilities beyond anything in Coalition databases. Secure the prisoner immediately, ordered the leader. If this facility is compromised, he represents our primary intelligence asset. As containment fields activated around Marcus, he realized the situation had become much more complex. His capture had apparently triggered a wider conflict between humanity and this Shadow Collective. Whatever happened in the next few hours could determine the future relationship between his species and a coalition of alien civilizations that viewed humans as a potential threat. The sounds of weapons fire began echoing through the facility's corridors, punctuated by explosions that shook the walls. Marcus recognized the distinctive whine of human plasma weapons mixed with the deeper pulses of alien energy systems. The rescue operation was turning into a full-scale battle. Report from Section 7 announced an automated system. Human forces have breached the outer perimeter using previously unknown stealth technology. Estimated force strength, 12 individuals. 12. The leader sounded incredulous. They're attempting to assault this facility with only 12 soldiers? Marcus smiled grimly. You said you'd studied human military operations. How many times have we achieved impossible victories through superior tactics and determination? The leader stared at him through its light-absorbing mask. You believe 12 humans can successfully assault a collective facility defended by 300 personnel. I believe 12 humans who tracked you across interstellar space to rescue one of their own are capable of anything. Marcus tested the containment field's boundaries. The question is whether you want to find out how far they'll go to get me back. Another explosion rocked the facility, much closer this time. Emergency lighting activated as main power fluctuated. Through the laboratory's viewing ports, Marcus caught glimpses of small, fast-moving shapes engaging much larger collective forces in the corridors beyond. The battle for his freedom was just beginning, and Marcus suspected both sides were about to learn things about each other that would reshape the galaxy's future. The rescue operation unfolded with the precision Marcus remembered from his Special Forces days, but with an intensity that surprised even him. Through the laboratory's reinforced windows, he watched human soldiers move through the facility's corridors like ghosts, appearing and disappearing with impossible speed. Section 12 has fallen, reported the automated systems. Human forces demonstrating advanced tactical coordination. Estimated casualties, 43 collective personnel, 0 human losses. The leader of his captors was frantically coordinating defensive responses, but Marcus could see the growing panic in the being's movements. The Shadow Collective had prepared for conventional assault, not for soldiers who seemed to materialize from empty air and strike with surgical precision. How are they doing this? Demanded the scientist, studying tactical displays showing the inexplicable advance of the rescue force. Our sensors show no movement. Then, suddenly, our positions are overrun. Marcus watched a familiar figure appear on the security feeds, Captain Sarah Torres, his former unit commander. She moved with the fluid grace he remembered, but There was something different about her and the other soldiers. They seemed to flow through the facility like liquid death, adapting to defensive positions before the defenders could even establish them. "Sir, we're detecting anomalous readings from the human strike team," the scientist reported, its voice tight with concern. "Their genetic signatures match the prisoners' enhanced patterns. All of them show the same evolutionary markers." The leader turned sharply toward Marcus. "You said you were just a soldier following orders. You didn't mention your entire unit had undergone the same adaptations." "I didn't know they had," Marcus replied honestly, though pieces were falling into place. The 3 months of his captivity hadn't been spent idly by his former colleagues. Somehow, they'd accessed the same enhancements that had changed him over years of combat. Another explosion, this one directly above them, sent debris raining down from the ceiling. Emergency barriers activated as the laboratory's atmospheric integrity was compromised. Through the chaos, Marcus heard something that made his blood run cold, the distinctive sound of human voices coordinating an assault, but with undertones he didn't recognize. "Marcus, we're coming for you." Captain Torres's voice crackled through the facility's communication systems, having somehow overridden collective security. "Hold your position." The leader activated emergency protocols, sealing the laboratory behind multiple layers of containment barriers. "Contact the War Council immediately. This changes everything. If all humans are capable of these adaptations, our threat assessment was catastrophically inadequate." "Sir, incoming transmission from the strike team," announced the scientist. "They're requesting direct communication with you." "Put it through." Captain Torres's image appeared on the laboratory's main display, but Marcus barely recognized her. Her features had sharpened, her movements carried the same predatory grace he'd noticed in himself, and her eyes held the same depth that had unnerved his captors. Behind her, he could see other members of his former unit, all showing similar changes. "I am Captain Sarah Torres of the Human Defense Corps," she announced, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to physically impact the Shadow Collective beings. "You are holding one of our people. Release him immediately, and we will withdraw peacefully." The leader found its voice after a moment of apparent shock. "Captain Torres, I am Primary Coordinator Vex of the Shadow Collective. Your man was captured during legitimate coalition law enforcement operations. His release requires proper diplomatic channels." "Diplomatic channels?" Torres smiled, and Marcus saw something predatory in the expression that hadn't been there 3 months ago. "Coordinator Vex, you've conducted unauthorized scientific experiments on a coalition citizen. You've transported him outside recognized space without due process. These are acts of war. We seek only to understand. You seek to evaluate whether humanity represents a threat to your power structure." Torres cut him off. "Let me save you the research time." "We do." Another series of explosions rocked the facility as her strike team continued their advance through the defensive perimeters. The casualty reports flowing across the laboratory displays showed the collective forces being systematically eliminated despite their technological advantages. "Your soldiers are demonstrating capabilities that violate known biological limitations," Coordinator Vex stated, studying the tactical data. "How is this possible?" "Evolution doesn't wait for permission," Torres replied. "When you captured Marcus, you gave us an opportunity to study the genetic changes he'd undergone during his military service. We found ways to accelerate the process." The scientist looked up sharply from its displays. "Impossible. These adaptations require years of specific environmental pressures. Human ingenuity has a way of finding shortcuts," Torres said. "We analyzed every battle Marcus fought, every scenario he survived, every adaptation his body made to stay alive. Then, we replicated those conditions using advanced simulation and genetic manipulation." Marcus felt a chill of recognition. His former unit had essentially weaponized his own evolutionary journey, turning his decades of combat experience into a reproducible enhancement process. The implications were staggering. "Captain, I need to know," Marcus called out, knowing his voice would carry through the communication system. "How many soldiers have undergone the process?" "Every member of the Defense Corps Special Operations Division," she replied matter-of-factly. "About 12,000 soldiers across all branches. We're calling it Project Reaper, in honor of your reputation." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of approaching weapons fire. Coordinator Vex and The scientists exchanged what Marcus assumed were panic communications in their clicking language before turning back to the display. Captain Torres, if what you're saying is accurate, you've created an army of enhanced soldiers based on combat evolutionary adaptations, Vex said slowly. Such a force could threaten the stability of the entire galactic community. Only if that community threatens us first. Torres's expression hardened. You've shown us that powerful alien civilizations are watching humanity, evaluating us, preparing to contain us if we become too successful. That's not a position we're comfortable with. The collective seeks only to maintain peace. The collective seeks to maintain control, Torres corrected. But humanity isn't interested in being controlled by species that hide in the shadows and abduct our citizens for study. The final defensive barriers around the laboratory began to fail as the rescue team reached their objective. Marcus watched his former comrades appear through the smoke and debris, moving with the same enhanced capabilities he'd developed over years of survival. Seeing them all transformed as he had been was both inspiring and deeply unsettling. Marcus, are you injured? Torres asked as her team secured the laboratory. Physically, no. But they've learned things about human evolution that could change how the galaxy views us. He gestured toward his captors, who had retreated to the far side of the chamber. They believe we're becoming something that threatens the existing order. Maybe we are, Torres replied, studying Coordinator Vex, and the scientist with the same analytical intensity they'd shown when examining Marcus. The question is whether that's necessarily a bad thing. The standoff stretched for long moments before Coordinator Vex spoke again. Captain Torres, this facility contains research data that could be valuable to both our civilizations. Perhaps we can reach an accommodation. What kind of accommodation? The collective's research into human evolutionary adaptation could benefit your species significantly. In exchange, we would request assurance that humanity's expansion will not threaten collective member worlds. Torres considered this while her enhanced soldiers maintained tactical positions around the laboratory. Marcus could see her weighing the benefits of accessing advanced alien research against the implications of accepting limitations on human growth. Counterproposal, she finally said. You share all research data related to human genetics and provide full intelligence on collective capabilities and member species. In return, humanity agrees to establish diplomatic relations rather than treating you as a potential enemy. And if conflicts arise between human colonies and collective territories, then we handle them like civilized beings through negotiation and compromise. Torres paused meaningfully. But if any collective member decides to take preemptive action against human civilians, they'll discover exactly why alien soldiers started calling us Reapers. Coordinator Vex consulted briefly with the scientist before responding. The War Council will need to approve such arrangements. Then, contact them, Torres ordered. We'll wait here while you get authorization. But, understand this, Marcus was the prototype. The 12,000 soldiers we've enhanced using his genetic template are just the beginning. Every human who serves in hazardous conditions now has access to accelerated evolutionary adaptation. How many humans serve in hazardous conditions? Asked the scientist, though Marcus suspected it already knew the answer. Mining operations in dangerous star systems, exploration missions in uncharted space, military service, asteroid belt construction, colony defense forces, deep space research. Torres smiled grimly. About 40 million humans are currently serving in roles that would qualify for enhancement. The number hit the laboratory like a physical blow. Coordinator Vex staggered slightly, and the scientist's equipment registered what Marcus assumed was the alien equivalent of shock. 40 million enhanced humans would represent the largest single military force in known galactic history, Vex whispered. We prefer to think of them as 40 million humans who refuse to be victims, Torres corrected. The galaxy is a dangerous place, full of species that view newcomers as threats to be contained or eliminated. We're simply ensuring our people have the tools they need to survive. The communication from the War Council came through within minutes, authorizing immediate diplomatic negotiations. The speed of their response told Marcus everything he needed to know about how seriously the Shadow Collective took the threat of an enhanced human military force. As the rescue operation transitioned into an unexpected first-contact diplomatic mission, Marcus realized his capture had triggered changes that would reshape humanity's relationship with the wider galaxy. His reputation as the Reaper had been just the beginning. The galaxy's older civilizations had spent millennia maintaining careful balances of power, assuming that newer species would eventually be integrated into existing structures. Humanity had just announced that integration on other species' terms was no longer acceptable. "Welcome to the new galactic order," Torres said quietly as they prepared for transport back to human space. "Where being underestimated is the last mistake our enemies will make." Marcus nodded, understanding that his months of silence and shackles had ended with humanity finding its voice on the galactic stage. The Reaper had become more than just one soldier's reputation. It had become the template for an entire species' evolution into something the universe had never seen before. The age of human expansion was about to begin in earnest, and the galaxy would never be the same.